Tonight from Havana, where the world changed overnight. Cubans stuck in the past are now looking toward a future without an embargo.
The average Cuban is ecstatic.
And U.S. corporations are ready to make a 90-mile dash for dollars. The White House considers what it calls a proportionate response to the cyber attack against Sony. And there's angry reaction to the decision to pull The Interview after a terror threat.
I think it's a coward way to go out.
Most Americans are enjoying those falling gas prices, but Manuel Bajorquez reports they could cost tens of thousands of people their jobs. And a sign of changing times in Cuba.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley, reporting tonight from Havana, Cuba.
Good evening. Tonight, U.S. corporations have lined up behind the new opening to Cuba. MasterCard, Cisco, Marriott, Pepsi, Caterpillar, and Major League Baseball all expressed interest in doing business here. It won't happen overnight, but Cubans here in Havana are just as eager. In terms of U.S. relations, it's been 54 years that they've been frozen in time. For all any Cuban can tell, Detroit hasn't made a car since 1961. Chevys and Fords, familiar to Eisenhower and Sinatra, live forever, thanks to a uniquely Cuban industry, counterfeiting new parts from designs of the 50s. Nearly everyone in Havana is ready to move on.
The average Cuban is ecstatic. They're euphoric. They believe that this is a new beginning for Cuba.
Alberto Cole is a professor of international law at DePaul University in Chicago. A specialist in Cuba, he moved to the U.S. as a child in 1961 when Castro imprisoned his father. I wonder how today the average Cuban's aspirations have been changed.
There will be lots more opportunities for the economy to grow, for Americans to come here, to trade, to visit, to invest, and to develop all kinds of exchanges that will benefit the people here and give this small country of 11 million people a terrific opportunity.
After 5 decades of a trade embargo, young Cubans don't know any other life. Fernando Says, director of a dance company, surprised us when we asked how things might be different.
It is very hard to explain how the situation, how the circumstances will be in the next future. But I think that I would be in a better position to answer that in 5 years from today.
You don't know what normal is?
Well, this is the air that we have been breathing for many years. And it is very hard to think how things are going to be in a different way, as we don't have the experience.
The dance company is one of the new private enterprises allowed by President Raul Castro, the more pragmatic Castro brother. Since 2011, he's allowed cell phones and some private ownership of real estate. But Cuba still ranks among the last in the world in internet connectivity. The U.S. sanctions were designed to weaken the Castros, but in one way they became stronger. For half a century, the brothers have told their people a David and Goliath story, that only communism could save them from suffering imposed by the United States. Wayne Smith was a U.S. diplomat in his 20s when he helped close the U.S. Embassy in 1961. He spent a lifetime on U.S.-Cuba relations.
We haven't gained anything in 50 years. Why keep repeating the same old mistake year after year when it isn't achieving anything? It was time to change, and at last, sensibly, we have.
Now, of course, Congress slapped that embargo on Cuba, and only Congress can lift it. Today, some members said they're going to try to keep that from happening. Here's Nancy Cordes.
This is the kind of deal you get when you send your speechwriter to negotiate with a tyrant.
Republican Senator Marco Rubio took his opposition to Miami today, where he was joined by a group of Cuban Americans, including Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen.
The Cuban people are no more free today than they were before Obama's terrible deal.
Arizona Republican John McCain panned the deal, too.
Any normalization, in my view, should have been gauged to progress on human rights and other issues, and I haven't seen that.
But his fellow Republican, Kentucky's Rand Paul, told a local radio station he thought it was a good idea.
You know, the 50-year embargo with Cuba just hadn't worked. I mean, if the goal was regime change, it sure doesn't seem to be working.
His comments reflect a softening in American attitudes toward Cuba. In October, 56% told the New York Times they favored reestablishing diplomatic relations, compared to just 40% in 1998. Still, the Republican leaders in both the House and Senate, who control the agenda, side with Rubio. He opposes lifting the trade embargo and wants to block confirmation of whomever the president nominates as U.S. ambassador. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest called that hypocritical.
It seems odd that Senator Rubio would be reluctant and, in fact, actively seeking to block the appointment of an ambassador to Cuba, when earlier this year he voted to confirm the ambassador to China that the president nominated.
Congress has made only 2 major changes to Cuba policy since 2000, and both were aimed at easing restrictions. One law allowed the sale of food and medicines to Cuba. The other made it easier for people to travel there for family and business reasons. Scott?
Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill for us tonight. Nancy, thanks very much. But what if the embargo was lifted? In Miami, Vicente Arenas has been looking at the prospects for American business.
For hotel chains, it is considered a game changer. If millions of tourists flock to Cuba, they'll need places to stay, and American companies are eager to build. Stephen Joyce is a Choice Hotel CEO.
Close to 4 million customers have already expressed a desire to go to Cuba. That's what goes to the Bahamas every year. This is a closer, bigger island. There's historic ties. It will change the nature of the Caribbean.
Miami-based Carnival Cruise Lines is also looking south, saying Cuba offers great potential. But while the tourism industry could benefit, Cuba's infrastructure is in dire need of repair. Jose Ezel is a Cuban-American studies expert from the University of Miami.
The fact is that Cuba is a small, poor Caribbean island, and I don't see companies rushing to invest in this small, poor Caribbean island.
There are lots of construction companies that could help rebuild the country, but the cultural and political landscape is a concern. Guillermo Fernandez heads a 750-member Latin Builders Association.
Our hesitation probably would be, you know, who would fund these projects? What type of projects? Would it be private money, public money?
One industry that is excited about the possibilities is U.S. agriculture. Exports of items such as pork, beans, and rice could increase by as much as $50 million in just the first year. Scott?
Vicente, thanks very much. Now, moving on to another big story tonight, the White House this evening is considering its response to that computer hacking attack against Sony Pictures Entertainment. Correspondent Bob Orr reports that the federal investigation is getting close to confirming that North Korea's digital fingerprints are on the hack attack.
Officials inside the Obama administration are still wrestling over whether or when to publicly accuse North Korea of orchestrating the massive hack of Sony Pictures Entertainment. But sources say the FBI has definitively traced the attack back to the regime of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Evidence shows hackers directed by North Korea's cyber unit used aggressive data-wiping malware to steal Sony's corporate secrets and then erase the company's computer files. Investigators found similarities between the Sony hack and a damaging 2013 cyber assault on South Korean banks and broadcasters. Sources say the digital fingerprints in both of those cases have been traced back to the north. The cyber attack on Sony Pictures is one of the most destructive ever directed against a U.S.-based company, and it apparently was launched as retribution for Sony's film, The Interview. Now that Sony has shelved the movie, the company stands to lose tens of millions of dollars. At the White House, Press Secretary Josh Earnest, without directly naming North Korea, called the attack a serious national security matter.
There has been destructive activity with malicious intent, and the administration believes that activity merits an appropriate response from the United States.
It's not clear what options the U.S. might have to respond. North Korea is already under heavy sanctions over its nuclear program.
And criminal prosecutions seem unlikely, if not impossible. Even if suspects are identified, they're well beyond the reach of the U.S. government. Scott?
Bob, thanks very much. Now, critics of Sony's decision to pull the movie say it sets a dangerous precedent, that giving in to threats could have a chilling effect on Hollywood. Here's John Blackstone.
By canceling showings of the interview, theater chains and Sony have angered and disappointed both moviegoers and those who make movies.
Look at this. Kim Jong-un wants to do an interview with Dave Skylark?
On Hollywood Boulevard today, film fans condemned the decision.
That we should be able to view whatever we choose to view.
I would love to watch that movie just to get under Kim Jong-un's skin right there.
Twitter feeds from Hollywood stars erupted. Rob Lowe declared the hackers won, an utter and complete victory for them. Jimmy Kimmel tweeted, "It's an un-American act of cowardice," and said more on TV.
Allowing a ruthless dictator of another country to decide what American people can and cannot see in our own country is against, like, everything we're supposed to stand for, right? I mean, people died for.
In a statement, Sony said, "We stand by our filmmakers and their right to free expression," but shared movie theaters' paramount interest in the safety of employees and theatergoers. One of the early screenings of the interview was sponsored by the San Francisco Film Society. Noah Cowan is the society's executive director. How do you see this as a threat to the future of film, to free expression on film?
What it means is that our Oscar films, the films that kind of come out around this time of year, may become a lot more milquetoast and a lot more non-specific.
Just as the internet was used against this film, it could be used to have it seen by millions around the world, streamed online. But so far, Sony has announced no plans to release the interview for viewing on demand. Scott?
John, thanks very much. Moving on to the economy, word today that the Federal Reserve is not planning on raising interest rates anytime soon sent the stock market soaring. Have a look. The Dow was up 421 points, the S&P up 48. In both cases, a gain of nearly 2.5%. By contrast, Russia's economy is nearly in a free fall, but you wouldn't have known that today to hear Vladimir Putin tell it. Charlie D'Agata is in Moscow.
President Vladimir Putin strolled on stage and spent the next 3 hours declaring with confidence the country was not on the verge of an economic collapse. You can call it a crisis or call it something else, he said. Call it what you will. Russia's ruble took a nosedive recently, losing half its value in the past year and sending Muscovites hurrying to the stores to dump their shrinking rubles. Putin blamed what he called outside factors, mostly plummeting oil prices. He also conceded that Western sanctions had hurt. But he defended the takeover of Crimea, saying it was like a Russian bear protecting its territory. Sometimes I think maybe it would be better for our bear to sit quiet, eating berries and honey, he said. Maybe they will leave it in peace, but they will not. They will always seek to chain it. Standing up to the West over Crimea has stoked national pride. A recent poll showed that the president's popularity is above 80%, even after sanctions. Something the Kremlin put on proud display in this promotional video released yesterday, showcasing Putin's accomplishments. Putin's anti-Western rhetoric may have won over his audience for now, but it won't do much to fix the economy.
The president didn't lay out any plans or policies on how to fix the economy today, Scott. But even if the ruble holds to the dollar, which it has for the past couple of days, Russians are looking at 10% inflation and a near certain slide into recession next year.
Charlie D'Agata reporting for us tonight in Moscow. Thanks, Charlie. Dropping fuel prices are not good for everyone. They could cost a lot of Americans their jobs. We'll have that story when the CBS Evening News continues from Havana. Just in case you were wondering, gasoline here in Cuba costs about $3 US a gallon. Back in the States, it fell another 2 cents overnight to a nationwide average of $2.48, and oil is down to just over $54 a barrel. We've been looking at the impact of falling fuel prices around the U.S., and tonight Manuel Bojorquez is in New Orleans.
The sparks are still flying for Louisiana companies that make equipment for the oil industry, but the outlook has started to dim.
When was it that you started to sense things are cooling down?
I'd probably say within the last 2 months.
Chris Aston runs Cajun Cutters, which has had to lay off 2 of its 90 employees in the last month.
I find that the oil companies can probably survive, but until they see something steady, they're going to put some of their larger capital projects on hold.
Oil and gas revenues account for about 14% of Louisiana's budget. For every dollar the price of oil drops, the state loses 10 to 12 million. In the nation's largest oil producer, Texas, 10% of jobs are in oil and gas. Low oil prices could make 30,000 of those jobs go away. But along the Gulf Coast, shrimpers are seeing smooth waters ahead. David Chauvin owns 3 shrimp boats.
You've seen people that have been in the oil and gas industry actually jump out and come back into the fishing industry because it's going to be more profitable for them to do so.
Large boats can hold 10,000 gallons of fuel, about 75% of their expenses. Chauvin says cheaper fuel means savings of $6,000 to $8,000 per trip and an edge over his stiffest competition.
Our #1 challenge in this industry is definitely imported shrimp. Possibly will be a lot more competitive than what we have been in the past.
So this is a godsend for you.
It is. It is.
Louisiana officials say job losses so far seem to be offset by hiring in other industries such as shipbuilding. But Scott, the concern is the longer oil prices remain at their current levels, the deeper the cuts could go.
Thanks, Manuel, and we'll be right back. A storied era in broadcast journalism has come to an end. Former CBS News correspondent Richard C. Hotelet has died. He was 97 and the last of the Murrow boys. Hotelet was one of the legendary CBS reporters hired by Edward R. Murrow to cover World War II. And he came with experience, including a 1938 encounter with Hitler.
There was Adolf, bright blue eyes, and he was another human being. He was pretty lousy at that.
During the war, Hotelet was held in solitary by the Gestapo for 4 months on trumped-up spy charges. He survived the downing of his plane, he parachuted out, and he covered D-Day.
The Allied forces landed in France early this morning. I watched the first landing barges hit the beach exactly on the minute of H hour.
His advice to young journalists: play it straight, don't tell them what you think or feel, tell them what you know. And we all benefited for it.
Richard C. Hotelet, CBS News.
Today, National Geographic named its photos of the year, and we wanted to share a few of them with you. This one captured tigers squaring off in India. In Canada, a wild owl checks for danger. These birds flew over houses destroyed in Syria's civil war. The grand prize winner shows a woman on a packed train in Hong Kong. In a moment, we'll be back from Havana with more. The opening to Cuba has been coming for a while, and here in Havana there was literally a sign relations were improving. Literally a sign. It started as a provocation. In 2006, the U.S. government put up a scrolling electronic news ticker on top of its building where diplomats work in Havana. It's not an embassy, it's called the U.S. Interest Section. In 5-foot letters, it printed news, reports of Cuban defectors, and even jokes about communism. The Cuban government responded by erecting an iron curtain, nearly 150 giant flagpoles directly in front of the building, blocking the sign. Then, suddenly, the propaganda war ended in 2009, about the time the Obama administration was making travel to Cuba somewhat easier. The State Department quietly took the sign off the building, and the Cubans dropped the flags. No one could have known at the time, but it was the beginning of something big. There remains a dispute about whose vision was being obscured. This sign says that the poles were raised to block the eyes of the American empire. But this week, it seems less important, now that both sides can see. That's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, I'm Scott Pelley in Havana. Good night.
To understand our changing world, you need to see it change firsthand.
Cubans are waking up to a new reality.
CBS News, original reporting.